What's going on, guys? Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Garrison Roy, and today we're going to go on another rant. But if you're new or curious of what the other segments are, sometimes you may have only listened to full-length interviews, or maybe you like the deep dive educational stuff. You listen to those a little bit. To be honest, not a lot of people listen to those, so maybe that's just me nerding out and being weird. Um, and then there's the rants. Some people give me some good feedback on those. Some people just really are here for the long interviews and listening to their friends and their buddies. And that's totally okay. But for this one, I'm gonna get a little bit on a tangent. Again, it's called a rant, but for good reason here, right? And I hear this all the time from athletes, and figured I would just go on and talk about it real quick. So we've all either played or coached with a guy who's like, why is my velocity down? Why is my performance down? Why is this down? What's going on? Why do I suck right now? Well, Jimmy, there's a lot of reasons. It's usually not always what you go to, though, right? Very prime example would be that athletes are like, oh, hey, it's got to be my mechanics, right? But there's so many other things to involve when you look at that, right? For example, could be just general fatigue. Did you throw more pitches than last outing? Or maybe you're getting to a point in your career or your season where you've accumulated more innings than you ever have before. And that, I think, is also a good reason why your velocity might be down. It may have nothing to do with your mechanics, or it could be a combination, right? That'll just be micro versus macro fatigue, right? Another one could be, strength deficiencies, or really you can kind of put this down to, hey, my body's down regulating to protect itself. And sometimes that can go into the category of injuries. I won't touch on that too much because I'm not really licensed to do that necessarily. I would refer you out to go to a specialist. If you're having pain for whatever reason, definitely get checked out. But again, soreness is different than pain. So make sure that you can differentiate between those. There's also recovery, right? How did you sleep recently? Were you on a long bus trip or long away series? Or you flew in from who knows where and you had 2 hours of sleep and you had to get ready to rock and roll? And hey, guess what? The velo's down because you don't got much gas in the tank, right? Like, pretty easy to kind of draw those conclusions together, right? Um, Obviously, the nutrition side. If you're not fueling your body, like I can use that example all the time for fueling a car, or even you could kind of put it in the analogy of a NASCAR driver, right? You can put fuel in, but if it's the wrong fuel, you're probably going to break down your engine. Or hey, we're going to put some fuel in, but not all the way, so you're going to only get so far. And you'll need those pit stops along the way. So you need that nutrition to kind of help recover, replenish those glycogen stores, get you rocking and rolling, right? The other ones that I think a lot of people may overlook, they may glance at it, but sometimes it does play a major factor. And that is the lack of game context or game aliveness, if you will, that I, constantly refer to from where I got from the guys over at the Movement Academy, Sean Miska and Tyler Yearby, right? But for example, let's say you're throwing your bullpen and you're on the mound. So that's a check. But you're throwing into a net in a cage, no catcher, no batter, just a net, open back-ended net, not even a nine pocket. And your velocity is down. Well, I would say, hey, if you probably added in a batter, if you had a catcher, you have some of these other variables added in, you might be able to crank it up a little bit, right? Or maybe you're like trying to test for velocity and maybe you're like, oh, well, it's raining outside, or, there's other environmental factors to look at too. Or maybe the ball changed. I don't know. That's happened in pro ball. something to think about there. But for more lower level guys, right? Like you could be going from a super low laced ball to then a really high laced ball. That'll probably help out with movement. And that might cut down some of your velocity too. Your pitches might run or cut differently because the balls, aerodynamics are reacting differently on higher seam balls than lower seam balls. So something to think about there too, right? But the point I'm trying to make is not always mechanical, but it also could be, right? And you kind of have to go about this with an open mind, be like, hey, okay, yeah, there could be this mechanical thing, but what other factors are involved in maybe my dip in velocity? Maybe you're going a little bit harder at training, or you're trying something different. And sometimes your body has to recover and you may not be able to bounce back. Or maybe you're making a mechanical change and it's not going the way that you want, and your velocity is dropping alongside that. Sometimes you might need that in order to kind of help make a good mechanical change, and your body's just not used to firing in those positions. But after a couple of weeks, if you're still making that mechanical change and the velocity, or maybe you're still having pain while throwing and it didn't change, you got to go back to the drawing board and figure out something that's going to work and help really just improve this overall of your performance, right? And I think that's the main thing that you got to measure what matters, which is a previous podcast that I went on. So if you guys want to go back and listen to that one, feel free to. But again, it's more than just the velocity. It could be, hey, why's my stuff, right? You can insert the velocity of anything like, hey, my exit velo or my swing, or why am I running slower? Why am I not fielding as well? Why am I not feeling as great? Or, just in general, or hey, like, why is it taking so long for me to recover? Insert whatever portion that you want to try to improve and help you get in your zone of training, right? But my point is this, it's always going to be multifaceted, always more than just one thing. And that's where a lot of people, when they think that it's just that one little tinker, that one little tweak, and sometimes it is, and that's awesome. But you got to think a little bit bigger, zoom out a little bit. There's a lot of things that are going in that are affecting one another. The one that I didn't even really mention could be things totally outside of the game and training. It could be your personal life. I personally, if you listen to my story, did have that to kind of affect some of my performance in my freshman year in college, because there's things going on at home, things going on with a girlfriend, right? Like, also very indicative factors, because emotions change how people move and react and respond to the world around them. So you have to be very particular on that, right? Or even just learn how to flush it if you can't control some of those things and you're like, hey, I can't control this, or hey, I've controlled what I can control, and I just gotta release it and let it go. But that's it for this rant. Hopefully you guys got something out of this. If you know someone who needs to hear it, please share it with them and stay in the zone.